This month marks 80 years since Eleanor Roosevelt embarked on a secret 5-week mission to the Pacific during World War II. In the late summer of 1943, she covered 25,000 miles, traveling to Australia, New Zealand, and through the South Pacific into territory that was still under attack. The wartime mission is the subject of the new book, The First Lady of World War II, Eleanor Roosevelt's daring journey to the front lines and back. And joining us now, the book's author, Shannon McKenna-Schmidt. Shannon, thanks very much for coming on the show. Tell us more about this mission and the bravery that this First Lady emboldened.
Well, at this time, 80 years ago, Eleanor Roosevelt was traveling through the South Pacific, and the American public and the media did not even know that she had left the country on this risky expedition. And the trip was kept secret for the first 10 days as she made her way through the South Pacific. And when it broke 10 days into the trip, it just caused a media firestorm. And she traveled 25,000 miles over the course of 5 weeks to Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, through the South Pacific, and as you mentioned, into territory that was still under enemy air attack.
Tell us more about what people don't know about what she did on this trip, and also how it changed her, and perhaps it changed maybe her approach to how she supported her husband.
Yes, and FDR was enormously supportive of Eleanor's travels throughout her time as First Lady. And in fact, the fact that she traveled so much, or traveled at all, was one of the reasons that she was considered an unconventional First Lady.
There's so much about her and so much of the detail in here it's really a wonderful story. That she said, you know what, on this trip I'm just going to wear a Red Cross uniform. I don't have to pack any clothes, therefore I can bring my typewriter to continue writing my daily column. But also that she insisted on going to Guadalcanal, where there were real concerns from the American military about her safety, suggestions, you shouldn't come here, we're worried we can't protect you here. How did she get her way into Guadalcanal?
Well, first, it was very important for her to get to Guadalcanal. Eleanor felt an enormous sense of obligation toward the generation of young men who were being sent into battle. And going to Guadalcanal was a way to pay tribute to the servicemen. And dead set against Eleanor's trip to the Pacific was Admiral William Halsey, commander of the South Pacific Forces. And he was the man who would solely decide whether or not she was allowed to go to Guadalcanal. And as I said, this was very important to her. And Admiral Halsey completely changed his tune. When she first visited his headquarters, he was like, Guadalcanal is no place for you, ma'am. And he just wasn't going to let her go. But she persuaded him with the power of her example, and he saw that Eleanor Roosevelt was the real deal. And one of the things that particularly impressed him was how she would go through the hospital wards. She walked miles and miles of hospital wards during those 5 weeks, going bed to bed, comforting the wounded. And he saw the uplifting effect that her presence had on the troops. And I think that that's one of the most remarkable things and very telling of Eleanor's trip, is that Admiral Halsey was dead set against it. And then he ended up completely changing his tune. And he said that through the rest of the war, of all the people who came through his area, nobody did more good than she did.
You know, one of the more interesting aspects in a book filled with interesting aspects about a woman who we think we knew or know was her role in conversing with service members from island hopping one hospital ward to another. And it resulted in, eventually, one of the most iconic pieces of legislation ever passed by the United States Congress, the GI Bill. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so again, Eleanor, throughout the war, was very determined to see that legislation was passed to support the servicemen, the veterans. And the power that she really had was, so she's 10 years into her time as First Lady at this point, and she has built up an enormous media network that she uses to communicate with the American public, including her 6-day-a-week syndicated newspaper column called My Day. And in fact, she took a typewriter with her to the the South Pacific, through the Pacific, so that she could keep writing My Day in real time. And so not only is the First Lady in an active theater of war, she's reporting to the president and the home front while she's there. And one of the things that she did was she used this powerful media presence, and she used the public pressure to bring pressure on Congress to help get legislation passed for these returning servicemen. And the other thing that she reminded people is that veterans were already coming back. They needed the legislation immediately and not sometime after the war was done, because many of them were already coming back, with injuries that they needed support for and other things.
And you write in the book, too, that she lost 30 pounds during the trip. She was depressed when she got back, but she felt it was so important. She said later in her autobiography, the Pacific trip left a mark from which I think I will never be free. It's a really wonderful story that I haven't heard. I think most people haven't heard, and so well told. In the new book, The First Lady of World War II, Eleanor Roosevelt's daring journey to the front lines and back. Shannon McKenna-Schmidt, congratulations on the book. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to see you. We'll be right